Hello and welcome to the Action Network Podcast UFC Betting Preview. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward to help you break down a 14 fight card for UFC 323. We're going to give you our best bets, favorite underdogs, top props, and more. And if you'd like to tell some of the bets that we discuss on today's show, make sure to find the quick slip link both in the podcast and video description or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. 14 fight card from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. Prelims at 6 p.m. Eastern. Main card, 5-fight main card at 10 p.m. Eastern. Two title bouts. The main event, Merab Dvalishvili against Petr Yan for the bantamweight title. A rematch from 2023. These two fought not in the Apex, but at the theater at Virgin Hotels, which is the smaller 25-foot octagon as
Right.
opposed to the regular 30-foot cage. So I do think that is a significant factor that may change the dynamics of the second fight, in addition to the fact that both fighters in the first fight had broken hands. Petr Yan threw his right hand about 10 times total throughout the entire fight. He switched stances, was barely throwing it as a jab. He wasn't throwing it really as a straight right hand either. Merab shot 49 takedowns in that fight, which I believe is a UFC record, and Yan denied 38 of those 49 attempts. Also a UFC record. Denied about 76, 75% of the takedown attempts in that fight, 85% for his career. And he only gave up about 40 seconds of control per takedown that Merab landed across the 11 takedowns. Gave up about 6.5 minutes of control in total, but did lose a unanimous 50-45 decision. I thought going into that fight, he was essentially the right stylistic matchup to defeat Merab, or at least give him a difficult challenge. Now, both of these guys do tend to potentially start slow, build a little bit the longer they get into fights. I'd say Yan a slower starter in general than Merab is. We've seen Yan give away the first round in a number of his fights. I would like to see him start this one a little bit more aggressively, just because once Merab gets going and starts running downhill against you, it is really difficult to get away from him. But if he's able to deny the takedowns early, maybe win that first round, Petr Yan, I think he can make this fight much more competitive than the first one was. I think Merab too, you've seen in the press conferences leading up to the fight, just seems really drained, low energy, not typical fight week Merab. This is his fourth time cutting weight in the year. He'd be the first champion to ever defend a belt four times within the same calendar year. So a lot of weight cutting from Merab, a lot of activity. The hand injury for Yan in the first fight, hand injury for Merab in the first fight as well. But I actually think the cage size is going to be the biggest difference in this fight. Merab going to have to do a lot more to push Yan back up against the fence. Not going to get 49 takedown attempts in a 30-foot octagon. I do think Petr Yan has a chance of pulling the upset. I made him a favorite in the first fight. He closed the favorite in the first fight. I made him about minus 225 in the first fight. I make him about plus 223 in the rematch. I make his decision line about plus 450. So you can bet as high as plus 340 right now. I like that down to about plus 250. And I make his decision prop, as I said, around plus 450. You can bet 6-1 down to about 5-1. Billy, you're taking a similar approach here, but going with the point spread. Now, I believe this has adjusted. It was Yan plus 9.5 minus 125 yesterday at a similar offshore book. They had plus 5.5 at plus money. I believe DraftKings has also come down to plus 5.5 at plus money as well. So, how does the difference between the 9.5 and the 5.5 potentially change your approach to taking the point spread on this fight? And then any other ways you're considering betting it? Would you take a small poke at Jan's money line? Would you prefer his decision prop? How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, so the plus 9.5 line is still available on DraftKings. You have to go to fight lines and then alternate point spread, which is where I found it.
Got it.
So those are still up there at minus 125. Kind of couldn't believe just minus 125 for the plus 9.5 because you only need to win one round for that to happen, which feels relatively likely for someone like Petr Yan, who, builds throughout the fight, makes his reads, gets better as the fight goes on. And yes, Merab beat him 50-45, but most of Merab's other fights, he has not covered that point spread because it's almost impossible to do in a 5-round fight, not have one bad round. And Merab does not really do enough damage or threaten people in most of his fights enough to get 10-8 rounds, which is the other thing you're worried about with those point spreads, is that a 10-8 neutralizes it, things like that. Love the call out for you on the smaller cage. I saw it wasn't the Apex and just assumed that that was the full size cage in the previous fight. I think you're right. That probably will make a difference, as well as the hand injury. And of course, Jan's just younger, so we expect the younger fighter to make more improvements either physically or technically between fights. Not that he's much younger or that it was all that long ago, but when we're just trying to sneak out one round, I think that's more than enough to cover that distance. Other thing, I did like your phrasing where you said Jan defended 38 takedowns, still got taken down 11 times, which is a ton. And Merab also might attempt that many takedowns again. I don't know how many he attempted against 37 against Sandhagen. So like he might still attempt that many. We can't rule it out. But Jan, defends a few, lands one big punch in one round. I worry about Merab's durability with the fight schedule that he's keeping. We saw it with Poatan doing a similar thing, and it didn't go well for him. But he will have the record. He's the only champion to even attempt 4 defenses in a year. So regardless of result, he's got that going for him. Probably pushed for that because there's no more pay-per-view points coming in 2026. So he's making more money fighting this month than he would have in January. So regardless of result, shout out to Merab. Super sharp of him to maximize his earning potential. I do think Jan can win at least one round. I don't mind a sprinkle on the decision or his money line, but not something I'm super excited about.
Just wanted to point out one final thing before we move off of this fight, just from a camp versus camp perspective. This is the fourth time, fifth time that Merab's camp has game planned for Petr Yan. It is the second time that Jan has game planned specifically for Merab, considering the Aljo fights, factoring those in. So I do feel like strategically, stylistically, Aljo's camp or Merab's camp probably has just spent more time game planning for Jan in general, figuring out ways to beat him. Whereas vice versa, Merab just sort of a unique matchup to figure out or game plan against, but also the difference between Merab and Aljo is just the different fight stylistically. I think, the fact that Merab doesn't take the back, right? He doesn't have ways to win rounds like Aljo did, just like a clear, obvious, decisive round where, depending on the judges on any given night, even going back to the Sandhagen fight and the Umar fights, yes, it seems like Merab's winning those rounds, but you watch other fights that play out, in between different fighters, they play out stylistically similar, and you're like, I could see a scenario, where they're giving the guy who's defending the takedowns the round because Merab's not necessarily landing damage all the time as he's going for those shots and trying to grind dudes up against the fence. So could be judge dependent, certainly. If you can get that 9.5 at -125, I certainly would recommend jumping on that as well because I do think Jan wins at least one round in this fight. I think he wins 2 rounds in this fight, and I think he makes it extremely competitive. I think we get a potential split decision. And if Jan wins the fight, I think we get a trilogy as well between the pair. Haven't had a good trilogy in a while in the promotion. Let's move on to our co-main event. Alexander Pantoja against Joshua Van in the flyweight division. 11-year age gap between these two. Van significantly younger. Pantoja has the 2-inch reach advantage. This fight generally, in my opinion, I'm curious to see whether you agree, but I think it comes down to Van's takedown defense and his durability because not only does Pantoja have the grappling upside here, I think he just has the better chin of the pair as well. We saw Van get melted by Charles Johnson. Doesn't necessarily have the best striking defense because he's very willing to push forward, going to the fire and swinging out with dudes. And Pantoja can absolutely swing, can crack as well. And if these two are just going to brawl in the pocket, I might prefer his chin and durability overall, even though Van is a much better technician. We'll see whether Van is able to defend the back take because we haven't seen him have to shuck somebody off of his back yet at the UFC level. We've seen him defend takedowns. We've seen his takedown defense get continually better. Just haven't seen him have to get somebody off of his back or defend against the rear naked choke. And I'd imagine he will find himself in that position at some point relatively early in this fight. Billy, you have the breakdown up for this fight on actionnetwork.com. I don't have a bet on this fight as of yet that I'm specifically targeting. I think I want to watch round one, see how it goes. If Van is able to deny the takedowns, I might jump in on him live right away. If there is an angle that I like pre-fight, it might be Van 3, 4, or 5. You can get anywhere between 24 to 1 and 29 to 1 on his late round props. Considering a bet on his money line as well. I currently project him, though, about right in line with the market at about plus 200. So where's your money going for Josh Van against Alexander Pantoja? And then any other props or live betting angles you like for this fight?
Yeah, so I haven't got to this full breakdown yet. So these are not my complete thoughts. That'll be up tomorrow afternoon or Saturday, depending on when you're listening to this. It is a very interesting fight from a cardio standpoint because Pantoja always looks tired and then kind of figures it out. Josh Van has never fought 5 rounds. He attempts an absurd amount of strikes, like over 15 significant strikes per minute, which is a hard pace to push. So his cardio has looked fine for the most part. He kind of got that late stoppage against Charles Johnson. Don't think that was a cardio issue, but we don't know how that's going to go in the fourth or fifth round. So I'm very intrigued by that. Something I'm going to look for in the tape. You mentioned that his takedown defenses looked better per fight. 4 fights ago, he fought Cody Durden, who has a USA wrestling tattoo, got taken down a couple times. Then he fought Ray Saruya, Japanese fighter with, solid grappling, known as a grappler. Then he fought Bruno Silva, who didn't attempt too many takedowns, jiu-jitsu guy, can land a takedown here and there, not really a great wrestler. And then he fought Brandon Royval, who didn't even attempt a takedown. I am not convinced that his takedown defense has gotten better so much as he's been matched up in a way where they're not fighting him against pure wrestlers or people who are obviously going to try to do that, which is why my early bet on this is Pantoja over 3.5 takedowns at minus 115. We'll be betting to win half a unit at DraftKings. I'm not as convinced about his takedown defense. I am convinced that his get ups and his scrambles and those things will allow him to get back to the feet. And Pantoja is going to be probably continually looking for those throughout. He'll trade with him in the pocket a little bit, but if Van starts putting a pace on him standing, Pandoja will at least attempt those just to break his rhythm, put him down on the mat for a second, halt the momentum, that kind of thing. So I really like that. I'm going to be interested in some takedown ladders. They don't have the alternate lines up as I'm recording this. And then I might have a late bet on one of the two fighters, depending on what I see in the tape based on the cardio. But check that out Saturday afternoon once I've finished my thoughts on this one.
Football season's here, folks. We've got some huge improvements and updates coming to the award-winning Action Network app, which we're very excited to discuss in the weeks ahead. But to get most out of the app, you'll still need to be an Action Pro subscriber, and it's only with Action Pro that you get real-time pick alerts from the entire Action Network team of experts. Plus, you can access pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and our predictive analytics team, plus a ton of other benefits. And right now, Action Network podcast listeners can save $20 off the annual price of Action Pro. Just go to actionnetwork.com/pro and use promo code POD20. That's actionnetwork.com/pro. Use promo code POD20 for $20 off the annual price of Action Pro. Let's move on to our favorite underdogs for this week's card. We've got two fights we're going to cover in this section. Two underdogs for Billy. I'm head to head with him on one of these fights, though. And then we've got a number of fights we're going to cover in the prop section, about 7 fights there. We're going to finish up with some best and some final bets. We'll make sure we cover all 14 fights on this UFC 323 card. The underdog we're in agreement on for this weekend is Bogdan Guskov on the main card opener against Jan Blachowicz. Jan is 42. He's about to turn 43, I believe, in February. 76% of fans, though, did think he won his last fight against Carlos Ulberg based on MMA decisions. I believe the media scorecards were essentially 50-50. He's competitive with Poatan, draw with Magomed Ankalaev, still near the top of the division. And even though Guskov, 10 years younger, should be the faster man, Jan, some grappling upside here, though, at 42. I struggle to see him implementing it at a very high level, aside from maybe getting one takedown. This is a big step up for Bogdan, but Bogdan, who's never won a decision in his career, I do think going up against the guy who is extremely durable, who is a step up in competition near the higher end of the division, I think this is likelier to be a more competitive fight where Bogdan is not necessarily able to finish his opponent. And I think we're getting huge numbers on his decision prop and for the fight to go to a decision, considering he's finished all of his wins inside the distance. So I make this fight about plus 150 or plus 130, goes to a decision. You can decide as plus 155. And then I also make Bogdan about plus 600 to win by decision. You can get as high as plus 750 for him to win on the scorecard. So Guskov decision and Guskov fight goes to decision, but also like his money line with you as well at about a coin flip price. So how are you betting this one, Billy? And what are your thoughts on the method of victory?
Yeah, Guskov was my first bet of the week. Had that up on Monday in my luck ratings at plus 120. It's really just Jan is old. He hasn't won a fight, I believe, in 3 or 4 years. Oh, he had the Rakic one. That was an injury to Rakic and what had been a close fight. Not that Yan didn't cause the injury, but a little bit questionable. Last win before that was when Israel Adesanya came up from middleweight to light heavyweight. So his last like unquestioned win at light heavyweight was all the way back in 2020. Things have not gone as well for him there. He's fought some tough guys close. He's been really close against Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev. Since I believe even those fights, he's had two shoulder surgeries and a neck injury so bad he apparently had been waking up paralyzed at times, and he's about to turn 43 years old. I just don't think he has it anymore. You know, the Olberg fight was not super exciting. The method of victory really comes down to whether Blachowicz actually goes for it or whether he fights like he did against Olberg and just fights to stay competitive and not get put away. I'm a little bit scared of that myself. I could almost see like the knockdown slash decision if you just want to take submission out of there. Obviously, not getting a great price there. I like your angle on that because that has been what we've seen from Blachowicz. At some point, he's going to get finished, though, right? Like it's going to, if he keeps fighting, you have to think the durability goes away at some point. Not sure it's here. Either way, if we can get plus money or even down to like minus 120, I like Bogdan.
Fight we're head to head on is Tatsuro Taira against Brandon Moreno. Now, I expected to be on the Moreno side with you, but after doing the projections this week, seeing how public of a side Moreno was, my model did push me towards Taira. I make him up north of minus 150 here. Totally get the analysis concerning the Moreno side. In theory, he is the better striker, and he could actually have the wrestling advantage as well. I think Taira is the better jiu-jitsu, but I've never been particularly high on Tyra. I've never bet him in a fight before. This would be the first time I've pulled the trigger on him, and it won't be a particularly big bet either. I certainly get the path, certainly get the technical analysis for Moreno, but based upon how I bet and handicap these fights, very aggressive public support for Moreno as an underdog here, north of 60% on my combined projection, which makes in my model Tyra north of 60%. So feel free, Billy, give out the reasons that I alluded to why Marino technically looks like he should be a solid underdog here. I'm just pointing out purely based off my projection. I have to probably take the other side, but go ahead and break this one down, Billy.
Yeah, I'll have the full fight preview for this one. This one I have written. The really interesting thing with Tyra is that he is only looking to advance positions and get submissions on the ground. I have this stat in my article. In his fight against Brandon Royval, Tyra had more than 12 minutes of control time. He attempted five significant strikes on the ground and landed four. In that fight, Royval had just 2 minutes of control time, landed 16 significant strikes in that fight. So this is just one of those things where unless he can submit Brandon Moreno, it's going to be really easy for Moreno to steal rounds back with like a couple punches or a couple big shots. And if he submits Brandon Moreno, he'd be the first person to ever do that. So if you're playing Tyra, I think you almost have to take the submission prop or even finish prop if you think you can knock him out on the ground or get, the weird TKO like he did against Alex Perez. But he's either putting people away or he's giving away decisions for the most part. He has one decision victory over Edgar Chairez, got knocked down in that fight. Like that one was closer, I think, than the judges make it seem. Other than that, he's had all finishes since he came to the UFC. So I don't see him finishing Brandon Moreno, who's still just 31 and extremely durable, probably closer to his physical prime than Tyra. And unless his game plan has changed to just do way more damage on the ground, Moreno's going to be able to steal some minutes. So that is my analysis on that. I'd play Moreno down to a slight underdog. I don't think he's just going to blow the doors off of him. I think it's going to look close if Moreno does win, but I think he wins more often than not, depending on judging, just because he's going to be the one doing damage.
I've had a bit of a different take on Marino's progression or regression, I guess, in his recent
Mhm.
fights. I still think I do think Marino is slowing down a little bit. I think he's looked flatter in his recent performances. Tyra, on the other hand, should continue to be improving. So I guess that's the other aspect of the handicap for me
Yeah.
is, aside from Moreno being public, and again, I totally see the technical aspects that you broke down, and it was the side that I expected to pick before running the math. I guess that's the other angle in my corner is Moreno potentially on the wrong side of the age curve for flyweight,
Yeah.
Tyra on the correct side of the age curve, 6 years younger, entering his physical prime probably right now. So interesting fight for sure. I have seen a lot of public support for Brandon Moreno though. So at minimum, I would urge caution in terms of your sizing on Brandon Moreno. I do think
Yeah.
this could be a potential trap for this weekend. It seems like everybody's on him and he's not moved off of those underdog odds as of yet. We'll see if the price adjusts at all, but it's basically been around where it is currently, Tyra minus 130 for the entirety of the week. Let's transition to our props section, top props section for this weekend. As I said, there's about 7 fights I want to cover here. We're going to continue to move down the card, though, in descending order from the top with our featured prelim, Peyton Talbot against Henry Cejudo in the bantamweight division. This is the retirement fight for Triple C. He's 11 years older than Talbot, 6-inch differential in both height and reach. Last win for Henry was at UFC 249, the beer and cigarettes Keith Peterson knockout win over Dominic Cruz. Hasn't had many opponents that he can wrestle against in his recent fights. Merab, Aljo, Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw, not guys that he's going to proactively wrestle against. He go over 3 against Song Yadong, though. And he's not fighting at 125 pounds anymore either. I just do think up at 135, Cejudo potentially struggling with the physicality of these bigger opponents. Additionally, Talbot in his loss to Houndy Barcelos was giving up back takes. That's not something Cejudo really consolidates or a position he gets to super frequently. So as a result, I do think Talbot against a more traditional wrestler should have success as opposed to facing a jiu-jitsu practitioner who can take the back and lock in a body triangle. I think Talbot, if he does get taken down, scrambles, works his way back to his feet, and probably doubles Cejudo up, if not triples him up in terms of volume. My moneyline projection has him closer to minus 350. Cejudo, a very popular underdog this week, but I'm with Billy in preferring the minus 3.5 point spread at minus 110. You can also play a same game parlay. Talbot and the over 1.5 is minus 135. His round 2 odds are plus 950. His round 3 odds are 13 to 1. So a number of ways to potentially play Peyton Talbot this weekend. I do think, though, he finishes Cejudo attritionally. You see the one knockout loss on Cejudo's record, knees to the body. I think it is body shots. Cejudo, great head strike durability throughout his career, just like Kelvin Gastelum. I think the way you put those guys down is to work the body, hit him to the body. Talbot going to be throwing that teep kick out there, has knees to hit Cejudo with, both, as Cejudo's coming in, trying to attempt takedowns, but also as they're scrambling, exiting the clinch. So I think Talbot is going to put a lot of damage on Henry Cejudo's body and ultimately may get a finish as a result, if not win all 3 rounds clear. So Billy, Talbot minus 3.5, minus 110. Where do you like that up to? Do you see him finishing the fight or just winning a wide decision?
Yeah, so I've got the minus 3.5, minus 110. I'm also sprinkling on the inside the distance at plus 250. Like your ideas on the round 2 and round 3. Not, a hugely better price when you break down having to make 2 bets with the possibility of only winning one. Good with that, though. I don't think he just blows them away right off the bat. Cejudo's looked worse and worse in each of his fights since coming back, despite fighting arguably lesser competition. The Song Yadong loss was a bad one. He was getting pieced up real bad down the stretch there before the eye poke. Probably would have been finished had we seen the 4th and 5th round. Maybe even would have been finished had he not gotten the break for the eye poke earlier in that 3rd round, all of which is concerning. And then I did a full preview of this one too. I've got a little bit more in-depth technical analysis. I really enjoyed Talbot's change against Ione Barcelos. Talbot, very tall and long for the division. Typically, when you're longer, you like to fight on the outside and back up to maintain range. When he came back and fought Felipe Lima, who is also someone who can wrestle and, wants to wrestle a little bit, Talbot managed to maintain the range, but while still moving forward and keeping at the end of strikes. That is really important against a wrestler. Anyone who's wrestled, try to walk backwards and shoot. It's almost impossible. You need to get some forward momentum, some downhill momentum. And if Talbot can use his 6 or 7 inches of height and reach and still keep going forward against Cejudo, he's going to destroy him on the feet. Like, this is one of the most talented strikers we've seen come into the UFC in a long time. Super precise. I'm getting way ahead of myself. I am not actually comparing these two people, but he's got a little bit of that Anderson Silva in him where he touches you with a punch that doesn't look that hard, and then people just fall apart just because of the precision and the accuracy and the timing. I think he catches Cejudo. I know Cejudo has been durable to the head for a long time. He's also 38, about to retire, and runs a podcast and real estate investment company that seem to take up more of his time than training. So those things can all change. Love Peyton Talbot here. Almost laid some money on his money line. I think this is one of those, if the prelims wrap up and I'm up a decent amount, might just sprinkle some of those winnings on Peyton Talbot as a nice little treat to myself as we head into the main card.
So we're talking about this fight feeling potentially like a reverse correlation Henry over takedowns, Talbot over strikes. Like quick scramble, like taken down, quick scramble, get
Mhm.
up. But I mean, Henry has to shoot takedowns to win this fight, right? Like, he's not gonna outstrike a dude with a 6 inch height and reach advantage and probably speed advantage as well, and power advantage too, all at distance. Yeah, I think he needs takedowns in order to win the fight, but I don't see him
No
holding.
takedown props up right now for the record for this one. So I like that look because Talbot didn't seem to he seemed okay with being taken down and then immediately scrambling back up
Yes.
more so than playing floor is lava and never going there in the first place.
Yeah, you don't want to drop the hands and then eat an overhand. You'd almost rather like get taken down and then fight hands and try to scramble back to your feet, use the leverage of your height, etc. Because
Especially
Henry does
with
do that. I
his
mean, that's the one punch. He hurt Merab with it. That's the one punch that
Mhm.
Henry has that could actually hurt people. He does that, like he goes in, tries the level change, fakes the level change, and then he pops back up and throws the overhand right. So he
The
does
old
switch
Josh
that. He has
Koscheck.
power with it. Uh, it's the only way I see him potentially winning the fight, though, is
Yeah.
just one clean overhand putting Peyton Talbot out. I think that's pretty unlikely.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I talked about it a little bit in the breakdown, but he's figured out the tall guy thing of using wrestling switches when you get put on your butt because with longer arms you can reach across and through. And then
mhm.
he also might just like backflip out of a single leg or do some funky cartwheel or whatever. So like he's got a lot of options. Super fun guy to watch, super fun guy to root for. Like if you read any of the interviews and stuff with him, I would suggest everyone listening to this go to his YouTube channel where he posts like really weird short films of him like playing DDR at arcades and skateboarding with weird trance music. Just strange guy, but we need more of that. There's enough, shaved head white dudes in the UFC.
Lightweight bout between Grant Dawson and Manuel Torres. Very electric fight. Got a couple of electric lightweight bouts in a row here on the card. Now, Manuel Torres one win outside of the first round in his career. I believe all of his fights except one have ended in round one. Very reckless, very violent, very fast starter. Grant Dawson a bit chinny, as we saw in his knockout loss to Bobby Green. So I do think there's a potential that Dawson gets nuked here quickly. But if he doesn't, I think he eventually takes over the momentum of the fight, goes to work, likely finishes via ground and pound. I do, though. An extended fight certainly favors Grant Dawson, leans more into his win condition. I like this fight to extend a little bit. Over 1.5 is even money. Dawson and over 1.5 in an SGP is plus 175. His round two prop is plus 510. Round three prop is plus 800. I do think he's going to be mostly defending, or at least trying to get into a grappling position in the first round. Could potentially finish the fight in the first round. I think, though, having maybe some Dawson and over 1.5 in addition to the round two and three sprinkles gives you coverage of most of his win condition, in addition to a live angle as well after round one. Billy, though, you're going to take the knockout prop on Torres, which is about 3-1. Where do you like that down to? And how do you see this fight playing out if Torres does not get the knockout?
If Torres does not get the knockout, I see it exactly how you see it with Grant Dawson taking over with the wrestling. Only reason I went Torres knockout is it's about 3-1. Torres round one is plus 380,
Mm.
which is a little bit better, but every fight or every round starts on the feet. You get those early second, early third round knockouts, which are going to be the windows for him. He gets a minute to recover, he gets stood back up, he throws a few big bombs at the start of each of those rounds. I think that is worth losing the 80 cents of juice just to get that price on that. But yeah, it's Torres early. He's going to be on the front foot, as we just discussed. Makes it hard to wrestle when you're kind of running backwards, trying not to die. If he doesn't die, Dawson's going to be great. Perfect live betting spot. If Torres clips him or hurts him, but isn't able to get him away, then we jump on Grant Dawson live. I think it's pretty binary fight, both in terms of styles and also time.
Kind of a similar matchup between Terrence McKinney and Chris Duncan in terms of the stylistic way it may play out and or the betting opportunities. Terrence McKinney here coming in as an underdog, but he is the fast starter of the pair, just like Manuel Torres. 2 inch reach advantage. He's the much more explosive athlete. We saw Duncan essentially knocked out before reviving from the dead, like The Undertaker against Charlie Campbell on Contender Series. He's had other fights where he's gotten rocked, recovered. Definitely the more technical fighter. Trains at ATT, has better cardio. Wouldn't say, though, he has better durability. I think both of these guys have very suspect chins. McKinney, very capable of getting finished in round one himself. But really, it's the cardio advantage for Duncan that should prove the difference and is the reason why he is favored. It's just difficult to bet him pre-fight, knowing that McKinney is likely to have him on the back foot and defending early, if not defending the grappling early. And you're very likely to get a better live price on Duncan after 2.5 minutes, if not 5 minutes. So I do think pre-fight, it's probably McKinney finish props or pass. You could play a same game parlay with Terrence McKinney and the under 1.5 rounds. That is plus 165. You could wait and then bet Duncan live. You could also, if you like Duncan, bet Duncan in a same game parlay with the over half a round at plus 125. So basically, the market there is saying that a finish in the first 2.5 minutes is about 15% of his win condition. I think it's probably half of that. After 2.5 minutes, Duncan's win probability, increases drastically. But for the first 2.5 minutes of this fight specifically, this matchup specifically, I think he's just going to try to not get finished. I think you'll get a better live price after that point. But if you want plus money pre-fight on Duncan at the same part or the same point in the fight at which I would live bet him, you can get plus money. Duncan by decision is 13-1. It's very unlikely to go to a decision, but as a result of the fact that it is so unlikely to get there with McKinney fighting, books are naturally going to overinflate his opponent's decision odds, his decision odds for that matter, too. We've seen McKinney fight so many times now. I think the market just drastically offers you, double the number it should be basically for these fighters to win by a decision, even relative to what the actual GTD, ITD odds are. But all of that said, McKinney and under 1.5 plus 165, or Duncan and over half a round plus 125. I think those are the two props I would take. And then Duncan live after half a round, after round one, are the ways I would bet this matchup. Not sure which way I'm going yet. I think I might take McKinney and Duncan live, but we're going to, sometimes I make my decision on these fights as I'm writing them up. I get a different feel for the technical analysis once you're actually putting pen to paper. But Billy, Terrence McKinney against Chris Duncan, any bet for you here? And I'm sure you agree with the Duncan live angle.
Yeah, nothing pre-fight. It's just the extremely fun game of trying to figure out and execute the live bet against Terrence McKinney at the right time because you can't wait for the end of the round. He's probably going to fold at the end. So, get all the apps open, get ready to go, get your fingers going, and then as soon as you see that moment where McKinney lands a big shot, usually because of the tape delay, by the time you get to putting the bet in, either his opponent will have recovered or have been finished, and then you don't put the bet in. So, straightforward game, but not an easy one to play.
Macy Barber against Karine Silva in the women's flyweight division. Really fun fight here as well. Barber, 4.5 years younger. Silva has the 2-inch reach advantage, but Barber pulled out of her last fight before the walkout with Erin Blanchfield. Can't really say pulled out. Apparently, she had a seizure in the back, suffered a medical issue, and as a result, they had to cancel the fight. But very weird leading up to that fight all week. Blanchfield was convinced that Barber was going to pull out of the fight. She said, the hardest part is going to be actually getting you to show up in the cage. And ultimately, she ended up being right about that. So there's still a mystery as to what was going on with Barber, aside from the medical issue that ultimately happened, because she was clearly dealing with some sort of mental thing or something outside of the cage as well that Blanchfield clearly knew about and was taunting her about. And then, the stress of the main event, et cetera, that can all trigger a seizure. I have epilepsy, so I'm aware of the epileptic triggers. Mine are dehydration and malnutrition. So got to make sure I eat, sleep, have my food. But stress, stress can be a huge contributing factor for causing seizures, and going into a main event like that, could have a massive stressful toll in addition to the weight cut on your body. But, it's difficult to pull the trigger here on Barber, knowing what happened to her physically before her last fight, and frankly, having a neurological issue. It's a bit difficult to bet on a fighter who may get punched in the head, not knowing what's ultimately going to end up happening as a result of that. So, yeah, epilepsy is really weird, man. I've had it for 5+ years, longer than that now. We still don't have a reason why I have it. There's a lot that we don't know about the human brain in general, but all of that is to say, how do you pull the trigger on Macy Barber here, considering she literally had a seizure before her last fight, and this is her first fight back? I think you wait to lie better because she has better cardio than Karine Silva. Both of these women are very dangerous. Silva, though, I think is the better starter. Barber tends to build more as her fights go on. Barber to win in round 2 is 13-1, or win in round 3 is 16-1. Barber in the over 1.5, I do not like because it's minus 130. Uh, but Barber late props or Barber live, I think is how I'm going to end up betting this one. I do show value though on Silva to win by decision. Plus 260 is what I make it. You can get as high as plus 370. So a number of options for betting on the fight. I want to see how Barber looks on the scales at weigh-ins today. We are recording this. Right now it's about 15 minutes before the fighters begin weighing in. So I do want to see how she looks on the scales this morning, this afternoon, before ultimately deciding to bet on this fight. But regardless, I think you can look to live bet her after the first round. I think it, gets you away from the concerns regarding getting hit in the head. But the cardio advantage, in my opinion, should be decisive and clear on her side. So Macy Barber against Karina Silva, Billy. Any thoughts or bets for you on this matchup?
Yeah, interesting you mentioned that dehydration and malnutrition mess with the epilepsy because when you're cutting weight for a fight, you're dehydrated and malnourished. Like that's exactly what you do. I don't know that she has epilepsy or anything like that. Like it hasn't been confirmed what's been going on with her,
Sure.
but but it's clearly something. I'm not betting this one. The only thing I'll say for my DFS players out there is don't have any exposure to this fight. It's not a great DFS scoring fight to begin with. And if Macy doesn't make the walk, then you're getting zeros on both sides of it. So it's just not worth the risk because we saw her, there's no late swap in UFC DFS. You can't switch back to someone who actually is fighting. So not worth the risk, in my opinion.
Yeah, very good point about. I mean, I think it's about plus 180 to end inside the distance. So it is, one of the lesser likely fights to envy a finish in general, even though I could see a finish happening. But yeah, the risk, as you pointed out, that the fight does not actually take place. Didn't somebody else do that? Like Carl Roberson or somebody just like decided not to show up for a fight. Josh Emmers at one point just decided like not to walk out. I remember there being a fighter in the cage and he was just like, my opponent's not coming out. What happened? You remember that, right?
I know what you're talking about. I can't remember who it was, but yeah, it's a thing. I mean, we never know what's going on. If you have a seizure right before you're supposed to walk out, not much you can do. But, for those of us speculating on these things, that's not a risk I'm willing to take.
Yeah, we've seen fighters have heard of fighters having panic attacks in the back who didn't end
Mhm.
up making the walk. Was it Tom Breese, I think? It's happened,
Somebody on
man.
the Contender Series too. They were like a fight away from his, and he said he had a panic attack, and they let the guy go.
Yeah, absolutely wild. I mean, hey, it's the nature of the sport. It's got to be freaky to fight in a cage by itself, let alone knowing that, millions of people are watching on TV and could potentially watch you turn into a highlight reel. So a lot of anxiety certainly goes into it. Big age gap, potential violent finish here between Jalen Turner and Edson Barbosa. Turner, 9 years younger, but he's also 4 inches taller and has a 2 inch reach advantage. He, though, did retire after his last loss. Um, he's been unlucky in the UFC. Dropped Gamrot, dropped Dan Hooker, lost split decisions, both of those fights. Hurt Renato Moicano, tried to walk off KO that one. Ref didn't give it to him. Ended up losing in round two or round three after getting taken down. Barbosa is in his late 30s. He's looked really flat in his recent fights. Lost to Jakar Close, lost to Lerone Murphy. Beat Sadiq Yusuf, but nearly got knocked out in the first round there. He's been exceptionally durable throughout his career. And I do think as a result, there's value on Turner to win a decision here. This fight to go over 1.5 is around plus money. Goes to decision plus 300. Turner decision is plus 650. I make the GTT prop about 2-1. I make Turner by decision about plus 314. So half of what the odds actually are. Again, goes to decision 3-1. Turner decision plus 650. I think are both value bets in this fight. Yes, a big age gap. Not sure how motivated or how much training Turner is doing after retiring and coming back, but I do think the physical differences, the athletic differences between these two at this stage of their careers gives Turner a very high floor in this matchup. I think ultimately, at worst, even though he's normally a guy who fades, tends to quit, I don't know if this is the type of matchup that is going to cause him to quit. I think these two may end up just kind of sparring for 15 minutes if Turner doesn't hurt him and finish him early, and then it turns into a sparring match after 5 minutes. So, yep, just to reiterate, Turner by decision plus 650, maybe the best way to bet this one. Billy, Edson Barbosa, Jalen Turner, any bets for you here?
Yeah, probably not betting this. We'll have a full preview from John Lanfranca up on that soon. I like it from a DFS standpoint because I could see either guy completely quitting or being broken like super fast in this fight and wouldn't really be shocked. Jalen Turner should not come back at lightweight. Like I would hate my life and want to retire if I cut the 86 pounds he had to make 155. I don't know why he came back if he was going to do it this way. Like just come back and be at 170 is what I would tell him. And I guess I am telling him on the very slim chance that Jalen Turner listens to our betting preview podcast. Please just go up to 170, man. You're huge. You'd be one of the bigger dudes at that division too. What are we doing? Yeah, I'll have a bunch of DFS exposure to both of these guys though, just because very wide range of outcomes in my opinion on what could happen. And either dude just getting flatlined in a minute wouldn't really shock anyone, I don't think.
Another fight I want to wait to see the weigh-ins for. Have to see what Turner looks like at 155 before actually pulling the trigger on
Yeah.
any of those bets. Always a strong chance he could look terrible, and you want nothing to do with an over or decision prop there. Best name fight on the card. This is the point in the UFC at which we're getting to like computer generated name territory because we've got a guy named Ebo fighting a guy named Ewo, just one letter of difference between their names. Ebo Aslan though 4 inches taller, 3 inches taller, 4 inch reach advantage. Ewo Baraneski won by round one KO on Contender Series via glancing jab. He's won all of his fights via round one as a professional, but he did go 17-3 as an amateur and had a number of decision wins. Comes from a judo background. I think he has the grappling upside here. We've seen Aslan look grappleable, but also his last fight against Billy Alcana, he did absolutely nothing. Probably the worst non-heavyweight fight of the year between those two. Just absolutely god awful. And also Aslan gas tank questionable after round one. So even though Baraneski, has all those round one finishes on his record, I think the back class, the having the decision wins as an amateur and 20 fights as an amateur, I think speaks to the fact that he probably can sustain his style for 15 minutes. Now I do like this one to go over. Over 1.5 is plus 160. Goes to decision is plus 430. And Ewo by decision is plus 850. Typically, in order to find a finish, you need both guys to engage. I'm not sure how interested Aslan is in actually engaging in a fight. So I think Evo may win a tepid decision, may end up finishing the fight, may finish the fight later, may finish the fight early. But I think the value is on the overs. Over 1.5, as I said, plus 160, goes to decision plus 430. Ewo Baraneski by decision plus 850. Billy, you're taking Ewo on the money line. I think I jumped the gun here because I believe he might be your best
No
bet
worries.
on this
Yes.
card. So apologies for breaking down this fight a little bit early, but we'll circle back to this one to reiterate it again at the end.
No,
But
I'll get it now because I have. It's certainly a final bet for me. I like the Ewo side, and then I have a prop on what is something you're going to talk about in your final bet. So we'll come back to those. Didn't learn a ton from Ewo, but he did knock out in 20 seconds Muhammad Ali, no relation, on the Contender Series. I did a pretty deep dive on him before the Contender Series. National champion in judo, national champion in nogi submission grappling, and multiple time amateur MMA national champion, or world champion, I should say, international, however you want to phrase, gamma, however they build themselves. So much more well-rounded than the 20-second knockout would lead you to believe. He can just do more things than Ebo, who can maybe knock you out, but doesn't really have a lot of plan B if that doesn't happen, and also doesn't really try that hard to knock you out. So if you're scared to get in there and engage with Billy Elikana, you're going to run for the hills against Iwo Baranowski. So I think we'll cover this one pretty easy.
Muhammad Ali, no relation. One of my favorite throwaway lines in the history of the show.
He's not.
Biggest favorite on the card, Monster Abdul Malik, currently about minus 1300 against Antonio Tricoli. Biggest favorite on the card, closed north of minus 1,000 in each of his last two UFC bouts. He's plus 125 to win by round one KO. The reason I wanted to highlight this fight, and specifically his round one KO prop, there was some questionable betting activity on the over 1.5 for Mansour's two most recent fights. He dragged Cody Brundage to round three. Before finishing him, it ended up being a draw due to a head clash. And then he also dragged Nick Klein to the 3 minute mark of round two before finishing him. And, you know, it's not the fact that the results ended up like that. It's the combination of how he fought and the egregious betting activity on the over 1.5s within 10 minutes of the fight starting, on top of all of the investigations we have concerning suspicious activity in this sport over the past year. So, all of that is to say, if Mansour was intentionally trying to drag his most recent fights out, his round one KO prop at plus 125 is going to look pretty healthy if he's starting out intentionally aggressive against Tricoli. So, no major thoughts on this fight aside from the fact that Malik may have been trying to drag his recent opponents out, and he definitely will not be trying to on Saturday with all eyeballs now focused on potential fight fixing. So, Billy, Mansour Abdul Malik against Antonio Tricoli. I don't imagine you have any ways you're planning to bet this fight, but any thoughts concerning his recent fights, whether you found those suspicious at all, or how you may actually want to bet this one?
No, that's really interesting. I remember watching and thinking like maybe he's just trying to build some cage time and experience. But if you were going to engage in some kind of gambling conspiracy, that's a better way to do it because you still get to win the fight and it's harder for people to point the finger. So very interesting. We could also see a fight here where one guy is trying to drag the fight over 1.5 and one guy is being paid to get out of there in the first round in Antonio Truckley because it sure looks like that's what he's trying to do. Collect his checks, go play in the World Series of Poker, and be sad that he is no longer Mackenzie Dern's boyfriend. That's, I think, the agenda for Antonio Truckley coming into the night. Love Abdul Malik for DFS. That's pretty much the only way I'll have exposure.
It's a shame that Tricoli is not bigger, so we could force him and Rafael Cerqueira to fight for the title of worst recent UFC fighter, because both of those dudes just coming in the cage and like trying to fold in under 30 seconds. It seems like every single time out. If you're on Twitter, we have a great new feature. If you see a bet from any of your favorite action experts or anyone on gambling Twitter, you can now tag at Playbook and tell our bot to build you a bet slip at a book of your choice. It will build it out for you with a quick slip link that opens right up to your sports book. So keep an eye out for a new tool at Playbook on Twitter. Let's get to our best bets and our final bets for this week's card. I don't really know what my best bet is going to be. I'm probably going to point to the first fight on the card, Muhammad Naimov against Myron Santos, for my actual best bet, my favorite bet. It would be the fight to go to a decision at minus 250. You can get it at minus 185, or I make it minus 250. You can bet it at minus 185. I also make Santos by decision even money. You can bet that at plus 125. He has a 2-inch reach advantage. Naimov is 2 inches taller. Santos is 6 years younger. I bet Francis Marshall against Santos. I thought Francis Marshall won the fight. That said, Santos is only 25 and he's going to keep getting better. He's an elite athlete. Yes, like Billy builds the luck ratings. I fully agree with that process. But sometimes, right, we lose a bet against the guy who's young and we're like, oh, he didn't deserve that one. But they do keep getting better too. And we keep trying to chase, something that's like already gone and you're never going to catch up with it. And I do feel like if you're trying to keep chasing Myron Santos right now and trying to fade him, you're probably chasing a much better guy than you were trying to bet against, 12 months ago, 18 months ago. So, in general, Naimov needs takedowns here probably in order to win the fight. He can get in the clinch. He can force ugly fights. I think it's possible that he wins an ugly split decision here. And as a result, I like the GTD, as I said, at minus 185. But Santos by decision also, I think, is a solid bet at plus money as well. Just the athleticism, the striking advantage. I think he ultimately sees his hand raised. But Billy, Muhammad Naimov against Myron Santos. Not sure if Santos was in your luck ratings piece for this week, but do you have any breakdown or any bets or any takes for this fight?
No, he was not, and I've kind of learned when one fighter is young and coming up and
Mm.
stuff that they might adapt from that, right? So intentionally didn't have that one. No bets for me on that yet. I'm gonna read your preview and see if there's anything for it. Might just be one where, my night starts half an hour later in terms of having any action on this card.
I believe that was also, wasn't that Santos's official UFC debut as well against Francis? No, he beat Con O'Fley.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that was the Ultimate Fighter
It-
finale,
the
right?
finale. So yeah, counts as
Yeah,
UFC, even though it's the show extended.
yeah, it's still a fight like in on a UFC card, but then first pay-per-view card, first fight in front of a crowd, a little bit
It's
reserved.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there could be a jump up there in terms of like mental preparation, etc. Cardio dump in the locker room, not cardio dump, adrenaline dump in the locker room.
Mhm.
Two more fights I want to cover before we get out of here for this weekend. Marvin Vettori against Bruno Ferreira. We are kind of head to head on this fight. I think it's a really interesting one to break down, though, because I was very surprised to find Ferreira is the older man of the two. He's 33.
Same.
Marvin Vettori is 32. Marvin Vettori has 17 UFC bouts. I believe Ferreira has fought 16 times in his career professionally. So Vettori more UFC bouts than Bruno has pro fights. Now Marvin has clearly looked like he's slowing down in recent bouts. It's possible that, being one of the most durable guys throughout his career, that it's finally caught up to him, that he's just taken a thousands of head punches. And, instead of getting put down and knocked down and finished, he's just kind of slowed down physically and declined athletically. I think that is a real possibility. But you look at the relative control time for either guy in grappling exchanges, 75% for Vettori, 44% for Bruno. I think Bruno has the much more dangerous finishing skill set. I think he has more power. I think he is more aggressive. I think he has better submission skills. I think he can absolutely finish the fight. And I do not disagree with Billy's bet whatsoever. But I do think more often than not, this fight extends. And I think Vettori wins a decision. I make his money line about minus 138. I make the goes to decision prop about minus 170. Both Vettori and the goes to decision are sitting around minus 115. I think this is a good buy low spot on the UFC vet against the guy taking a significant step up in competition. If Ferrer were 25, 26, I think I'd be a little bit more interested in him. I was very surprised to see not only that he's in his 30s, but also that he's older than Vettori. So I think he's very much a finished product in terms of development. Billy, though, you're going with Ferreira's submission prop here. Are you playing the inside the distance as well, or just taking the sub prop at about 9-1?
I'm splitting my exposure between the sub prop and his money line. I do think Vittori is just slowing down. It's not the years, it's the mileage, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
He's taken so much damage, and you can only be a guy who gets by on having a hard chin for so long, right? Like that's not a forever plan that you can execute. And he's done it for a long, long time, taking a lot of damage. But the reason Bruno Feda doesn't have that much control time is because when he gets you on the ground, he's just ripping your arm off, as we've seen in his last couple of fights. He was, an international level judo competitor before switching to MMA. Didn't really show it in his first couple of UFC fights. Took that loss to Abus Magomedov, and now he's like, all right, I'm getting back to my roots, rolling for submissions. Plus 900 is just crazy. Given even with what I said about Vittori's chin, I still think a submission is far more likely than a knockout. We've never seen Vittori knocked out. The grappling advantage is huge. So I like that. I just published the preview for this right before we hopped on. To win half a unit on Feda's money line, quarter unit on the sub prop, and then if we can get a big price on Vittori live after round one, because Feda win all out for a submission, gonna take that as well.
Like that live angle, I'll certainly be looking to add that too. Final fight on the card we want to discuss. I started the card today betting against the fighter trained on Long Island. I'm going to end the card today betting against the fighter trained on Long Island. If you followed the pod for any length of time, you know that me betting against one of these guys, let alone all of them on the same card, has not happened. I'm taking a shot on Faris Zayem against Nazim Sadikov. ZM is the bigger man. He's the younger man, 3 years younger, 3 inches taller, a 6 inch reach advantage, which I think will prove crucial for his jab. Could potentially get a situation where judges are weighing volume against power because I do think Sadikov is more durable. I think he has the better power of the pair, arguably has the better cardio too. But I think ZM's grappling is extremely underrated. It's gotten significantly better throughout his career. As a result, I think these two end up spending the majority of this fight kickboxing. ZM outlanding opponents by 2 strikes per minute at distance. Sadikov getting outlanded by opponents by 2.5 strikes per minute again at distance. Had the cut stoppage in a fight he was winning, or a fight he was losing rather. Had the third round knockout against Evan Elder in a fight he was losing on the scorecards. Generally speaking, if Sadikov does not find the finish, I do not think he is a particularly strong minute winner. So for S, ZM on the money line and make him about minus 175. Would bet him up to around minus 160 from his current price, closer to minus 125. Billy, ZM against Sadikov. Any bets for you there?
Yeah, I haven't made any bets on this yet. My one angle might be try to come in with a Sadikov money line ticket, then try to get ZM live because I agree with your analysis. If he's not getting guys out of there, like you said, I believe his only third round finish, at least in the UFC proper, was that cut outside of that, they've all been first or second round. So maybe you can swing it where you get plus money on both guys.
And that'll do it for our UFC betting preview. You can find more UFC betting content from both Billy and myself on actionnetwork.com. If you'd like to instantly tell some of the bets that we discussed on today's show, look for the quick slip links both in the podcast and the video description, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening. We'll see you back here for one more fight card in 2025 next week.